political choice that the ANC made. It's a gross error. Serious mistake. We had extensive discussions even with Floyd about this thing.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not surprised that he ultimately left.
Wow.
I'm disappointed now that he left, but I'm not surprised. This choice, this white man also pulled a gun on us.
Sure.
That's a lie. The people never voted for government of national unity.
Absolutely.
The people voted. The government of national unity is a political choice.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and today I'm really excited to be joined by the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Mapaila. Thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you very much, Faizan.
Great to have you. And before we get into all that's happening in our politics, I wanted to ask about your upbringing. And was there a particular moment in that upbringing that politicized you and made you into the activist that you later became?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I was born in Thokoza in Ekurhuleni in the East Rand. We used to have constant police raids at home for the police to look to check the people on the permit. And if you have got guests, they are not on the permit and you can't explain why they are here, then they're taken out of the house. So our family members will be harassed from time to time, depending on when they visited and the raid comes. That was a traumatic experience. And later on, I was in Limpopo in a place called Gravelot. Some years later, in my youth, and I see we're at the garage. A white man comes driving a bakkie in a searing heat. He has got a black man at the back. He's seated in front with a dog. Yeah. And at the time, we just reacted with a cousin of mine to this reality. And it caused a scene at that moment. And of course, this white man also pulled a gun on us.
Sure.
But there was another black policeman from the then Homeland government who also came and from the garage shop to try and calm the situation. And at that time, I was fully politicized. I knew something deep is not right. Yeah.
Wow. We often these days, move to questions of service delivery and governance, but apartheid is still, with us, even though we don't mention it much. And in some ways, we've almost stopped speaking about the trauma of that scar in our society.
Yeah, look, apartheid is embedded in our socio-economic fabric. And the political elites, the mistake they make is to think it away and not to deal with it to go away. Because they think if they can go and have a coffee with the former apartheid masters who will just accept the reality, then apartheid has ended. The system is embedded in the framework of our economy, and that's how we continue to see in actual its expression is through poverty of the majority of our people in a country so plentiful with resources and a huge economy on the continent that we should be our people generally should be living better than what it is. So it's a consequence of existing apartheid in different forms. In other words, you have a silent discrimination in democracy and in freedom. In any case, one still believes that freedom that we enjoy today is not freedom that empowers the people to be independent, to sustain their livelihoods, to live better. it was just freedom away from the apartheid laws. But we haven't dealt with the system of apartheid at all. We have just scratched the surface of it.
And once that moment where you realized after the gun had been pulled on you, you know, in these racist ways, how did you then become active, and how did you end up going into the movement itself? What was your entry point into the liberation movement?
Well, I was in the student movement, was youth activist in my township, and as well as because I was expelled from school, from different schools in my youth days. So generally my youth was youth of activism. Until ultimately we were recruited to join Mpofu-Walsh at the military wing of the ANC and SACP. And that was it. There was no more return back. Firstly, before that, underground work that involved military combat work as well, that kind of a thing. So ever since then, it has just been a platform of activism, reading penned material, going deeper to understand what are the problems. Now fully confronting the system consciously, understanding the collaborators of the systems, of the apartheid system, as well as those who were on the side of the people. Yeah, so since then, one has been an activist, yeah.
Fam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch, that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. You know, there are many people these days who claim they were part of the liberation movement, and when you actually trace it, you realize they joined quite late or after the 90s. But I know there are certain things that you can't talk about even to this day, but the decision to join Mpofu-Walsh, for example, what was that like, you know, to take a decision that you're actually going to fight, as Mpofu-Walsh said, and, you know, what was it like to take that decision and actually basically give up your life for a struggle that could lead to your death?
Well, firstly is that there was a time when I think in 88, some of our comrades died in Thokoza. It was an operation that weekend, several people died in various townships overnight. So the special branch raided different areas. And in my area, we had some of our comrades who died from my section. And I was there in the sectional leadership of South African Youth Congress. And I had to give what was considered perhaps a fiery speech at the memorial service at the Roman Catholic Church in Thokoza. The late Comrade Mjalefa Mahlasela and Comrade Chechela Machiche, these two in MK unit, were there. And after that, they determined that I'll be next. I don't know how they determined that. And so they determined that I'll be next, and they felt that I should be taken out of this particular process. So one then went deep into underground work with other commanders like Comrade Temba, we used to call him Oros Mafuta, at the MK people. He used to be the national administrator of MK at Shell House. Then I just left the family, then focused exclusively on underground political work. So at that time, I no longer stayed at home. So it was tit for tat activities, this and that. ultimately safe houses, those kind of things. And they felt if you can operate almost in a better way like this, the best thing is for you to leave. Yeah.
It's amazing how many people involved in MK we still don't know that they were involved today. For example, I was at a funeral the other day of someone who I thought was just a lawyer, and I'd known him my whole life. And then at the funeral, suddenly they were like, yeah, and his MK work. And I was like, what? He was part of MK. Like, I don't know if it's a code of secrecy still, or whether there's still things that can't be told, but there are lots of people who are walking around in South African society who are actually in MK, but we don't know that they were MK combatants.
Yes, the sphere of MK military struggle was varied and wide. It involved a number of things. For instance, there will be people who were initially internally trained. I was one of those that was first internally trained, and were engaged in different kind of operations. There were people who were also internally trained to handle messages, secret messages, to distribute messages, and also to handle firearms, and also to keep them safe in different forms. So in that regard, somehow, some of them will unwittingly be brought into military struggle. It was called underground. So underground wasn't necessarily the military struggle.
Sure.
But it also involved military struggle. So if you find, let's say, someone was responsible for distribution or safekeeping of armaments, safekeeping of combatants or on operations, and they get somehow to be briefed. Because, for instance, I remember at one point when I got the name Africa, I got it from underground activities, because there were 3 solis in our unit.
Okay.
Yeah, underground unit. So,
Yeah.
so one day we would go to this old woman. She was a colored lady, and she wanted to describe who came to collect the things to other comrades. And she says, solely the black guy, the African guy, solely African. So it stuck with me. That I was then called Solely Africa. Then the other one, Solely, still there, is still in the army. He's actually in the Navy now. Another one is with the Metro Police. He left the army, but at least they're still in the security cluster. So we're in the same unit. The entire family, their son was with us in MK. He died, Mashiko Loli. So the entire family was involved in underground activities, including in the distribution of firearms. Now, the father, Bob Mashiko, is late as well. He used to be an old policeman. When this thing hit him that his children were fully involved in the liberation struggle, he decided to be too helpful. And he became our father figure, helping us to do many other things. And staying in his house was as safe as anything, because the police will never come to raid it.
Right.
Yeah. So in that form, he get involved into the underground work. But not just the mere and the underground work to say so-and-so was here, here's a message, but the real involvement of serious stuff, some of the DLBs and other things, that is the dead letter box, the firearms properly put together. And these firearms, they are always taken out when there are activities or important operations. So a place like his, which was considered safe, we didn't have to put them underneath the soil or anywhere else, just for them to get a nice place to keep them. The old lady, for instance, used to sell some liquor at some point, so We had a nice compartment on the fridge underneath, so we'll keep them there.
Yeah.
So between the few people who were allowed to access them, every time we need to go for some activities, we'll come in and pick them up. But this were something else. The bottom line is that the entire family, the father, the mother, the son, ended up in military activities. Some wittingly, some unwittingly. Of course, the son then went for formal training, both inside the country and also outside the country. Yeah.
Did you come into contact with Chris Hani, and what are your memories of him?
Yes, I met Chris first underground when he was here. In fact, if my memory serves me well, he should have been with Kebuza. And we had some discussions on one important activity that they wanted executed. With Comrade Clocks. Comrade Mahlomola is still alive. It wasn't a big moment. It was, we were shocked ourselves that actually this was him. And he was introduced to us as Mahanza.
Okay.
And we kept on saying, Mahanza, that man. Later on, we found that that's actually the chief of staff.
Wow.
Of course, then addresses, and that was it. Apart from that, I've never had proper time with him. At person to person, I was too young or too low at the rank to be seated there with him. It was those few moments when you would have been in the camp. Your unit is asked to be the main unit, securing his team. That's the closeness, but otherwise there wasn't that opportunity. I miss it. I wish I could have, but I discuss with him all the time in my thoughts.
Sure.
I consult him all the time through his writings, through his expositions, and how he treated our comrades, both in the underground, the family of our departed comrades, the soldiers themselves, and generally his attitude towards the revolution and his respect for the people. And that's the thing that I try to emulate as much as is possible. The lessons from him, I believe he was perhaps the most outstanding revolutionary to come out of South Africa, selfless, who was never, in my view, embraced by elitism. Despite that, he could have any other thing. He was Deputy General Secretary of the Communist Party, assisted Moses Kotane at some point in the 70s, and had an important role as Chief of Staff of the Army, a Chief Rep of the ANC in different categories or places. But he never was pompous and kept the dignity of a revolutionary. And that for me remains important, and it's something I always look forward to try and see how best we can emulate his own contributions and take it further, because it was not just also about his personality per se. It was about how he explained in simpler way the task of the working class, the task of the revolutionary movement, and how those who characterize themselves as revolutionaries get committed to that task. And to that extent, I think he has been an outstanding leader of our party.
Let's turn to the alliance itself. You're the General Secretary of the SACP, which is a very important institution in our politics. And the alliance of COSATU, SACP, and the ANC has really been at the center of South African politics in the democratic era. What do you think have been the strengths and weaknesses of the alliance in this democratic moment?
Susan, that's a big question. We need a full day to discuss this. But certainly, a few points. One of the key features in the alliance, or it's the alliance, firstly, it's set up on the basis of common approach to the revolutionary tasks.
Sure.
And in its practical work of responding to that revolutionary task, has been based on dual membership. So we share members across the entire alliance. So we have SACP members who are ANC members in their own right. They don't participate in the ANC because they are in alliance with the SACP. They are also activists in their own right in the ANC, and also in the trade union movement, and as well as in the civic movement. And the Communist Party played a critical role in establishing and strengthening these entities, these organizations across the board. But I think when one evaluates the period, the last few years before the unbanning of the liberation movement, what one may call the secret talks or the pre-negotiations and the negotiations period, post the unbanning of the movement, the return of political exiles, we find that the world was shifting at a rapid pace. There was the fall of the Soviet Union, which was the anchor country to the liberation forces across the world. And its fall had a huge impact in the elevation of U.S. capitalist hegemony and U.S. political hegemony, as well as U.S. and its NATO partners' security hegemony across the world. And this had impact on liberation movements that were still fighting, were on the last mile to freedom, the ANC being one of them, or South African liberation movement being one of them. There were others in the world. We had SWAPO here in Namibia. We had Frelitini in East Timor, and several others. But these were critical ones. And we also had the movement in Southern America, in Colombia and other places. And that period shifted dramatically against these liberation forces because they were supported by the Soviet Union in the main. And our leaders, who had also understood that in a history spanning over 4 centuries, over 400 years of colonial and imperial oppression of our people, there was an opportunity for our country to transit towards democracy, towards the universal franchise, because that was one of the main tasks of the revolution, for the people to have the right to vote.
Sure.
And that's why we'll come back to this point about how the people are viewing the vote today, where a majority of the people do not vote, as opposed to a minority of the people who vote and create the political system that we live under. So that was very important. And our leaders, in particular, President Mandela and the Rivonia trialists, almost all of them members of the Communist Party, and President Tambo on the one hand, and others, felt that we needed to transition in this period, particularly now with the demise of those who have supported us. When we started the struggle, we didn't start the struggle because of their support. Our people initiated their own struggles, and we encountered in the process many battles and many victories, and sometimes we suffered some setbacks in those battles, particularly in the resistance wars across the country, in defense of the country. So the leaders felt that we needed a moment to give our people a sense of democracy in their hands. Then they can determine its future. And that was an important moment. And it's a moment that we characterize in the party as the democratic breakthrough, the 1994 moment. It's not a moment, we don't call it freedom.
Sure.
But for the people, this was too important, too overwhelming, given this almost 4 centuries of colonial exploitation and oppression. So with that, there were many compromises. For instance, the first main compromise was that there was no class transfer of political power. In other words, there was no transfer of economic power to the masses, to the oppressed. There was the political component of rights that was transferred to the masses. And we took that, to the extent that our people were not allowed to be in some parts of the cities that they built, like Johannesburg, for instance, at certain hours of the night and so forth. Prohibition on and different movements, freedom of speech prohibited, and many other things. Interracial marriages prohibited, or just to love someone from the other color line was unaccepted by the apartheid regime. So with all of that, the political rights were too important for our people, still are important even today. And therefore, it's a moment that when you think about it, we could have put the gloves, the spectacles of our revolution to look into it and say, is this the moment of freedom? Can we attain the moment of freedom? And I still believe we haven't. Because the class transfer of power had not taken place. And Slovo had warned a little bit about this thing during the negotiations. And he said, not to the extent of the full class transfer of power, but he said, if I paraphrase him, that don't just transfer power, transform it. So, and we spend too much time in the sphere of transformation of power rather than transformation of class power, which is what should have actually happened, because the core of apartheid was economic power. The racial aspect was its expression. And that is why I believe that if one were to criticize our liberation movement over the years, it's a lack of serious attention to this fact, to this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's a major weakness. Of
there
course,
was almost an assumption that with political power, economic power would follow.
Yes, and
we haven't seen that.
Yeah, we tried the BEE notion. It didn't work or hasn't worked. And you remember the party came in and criticized the BEE in its form because it was now justifying the creation of a political elite at the top at the expense of the masses. We called for broad-based black economic empowerment, where we were conceptualizing empowerment of communities, even by the state, by the government. But this was subverted. We still see the BEE thing. Some of the key role players in that field, for instance, Martin Kingston and others, who facilitated a lot of BEE deals for political elites, are still instrumental in driving the economic trajectory of our country today, because the political elite in charge worked with them, are their friends. They benefited from BEE deals and so forth, including the president. So this is how bad the situation is today, that from a class perspective, if you don't address these questions properly, anything that we talk about the concept of freedom is actually an illusion. It's I don't want to say it's untruthful in a sense that this will unwind many gains of the revolutionary movement. But it's not absolutely true in the manner that is projected in public. That is why you can have a state that is wiped out of its economic capacity deliberately. And hence, when we in the Communist Party are fighting for the capacity of the state and the role of the state in the economy, it's precisely because that aspect of society, the state, represent in the main the majority of the people who elected it into office. And when you take that away, you are worsening their living condition, as is the case today, because you have not touched the economy. It's still in the whites or in the hands of the minority white groups, and they've thrown it all over the world in the name of globalization, and you can't even call yours. That is why, for instance, if you look at the big companies of South Africa that were built by the toil and labor of South African workers, the Anglo-Americans and others, Old Mutual and so forth, they left South Africa's shores. They registered in England. Their primary tax base is in England, in London. They registered as a primary listing is the London Stock Exchange. They are no longer South African companies. They are still big here. People still see them as such, but nominally they are not South African companies anymore.
Let's come to the present based on that analysis, because we're at a very important moment in our country's history where, for the first time, the ANC has joined forces in some ways with what one would consider their historical political enemies, particularly the Democratic Alliance. Now, I know that there are other parties as part of this coalition arrangement, but we can't overlook the two biggest parties. How do you feel about this arrangement, and what are your thoughts on what it means for the overall picture of true freedom and liberation in South Africa?
Sizwe, I must say firstly that I'm very stressed by this situation. It's given me sleepless nights. I'm writing a lot about this moment, and I think every time I reflect on this, I get deeply disappointed.
Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch, and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel, so why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it.
First, by the political choice that the ANC made. It's a gross error, serious mistake. And I believe it's a political choice. Because there were other possibilities for the ANC not to collaborate with the DA. Because the DA doesn't represent any iota of the interests of the majority of our people. It's a party of white interest, of the white minority. It has inherited the colonial regime's interest, the imperialist regime's interest, the apartheid regime's interest. It is not intended by any measure to bring our country together and to build a united South Africa. It just wants the black person to remain subservient to the white person. This is the deepest pain one feels every day, because our leaders, the political elite, committed this criminality of joining forces with the DA. It's a political choice. I think they will be judged harshly by history, and I call on history to judge them badly for the betrayal of our people. This is a betrayal, Sizwe. It cannot be entertained in any political decorations. It cannot be laced in any other form. It's a sellout of the people's aspiration for political conveniency. You see, first, they try to justify it even in public. Worse still, they even put advertisements to justify this thing. They could not even put advertisement to talk about what is the intention of the liberation movement. But they put adverts as government through SABC and others. Even on my way here, I was seeing SABC brandishing ministers of this GNU. For the first time, I've seen this. It's a moment that we should reject with the contempt that it deserves, because it's a sellout position. It reverses many gains. It disrespects the sacrifices of many of our comrades and our people who died in combat for the liberation of these people, of our country. Not to sell it out at the political expedience of the elites that just are addicted to political power, to office, and they don't care about the well-being of the people, but political deals. It's a simple political deal. But whoever has weaved this deal together will pay dearly. Because our people will never forget this moment. We will never forget this moment. This period has elevated the arrogance, not only of capital, because fundamentally that's what I'm going to come to, because that's my main prism of critique of this situation.
Sure.
This moment, not just only expressing itself through capitalist lenses, but purely from racial lenses, it has set back our country many decades.
Sure.
Overnight, our people who have been undermined by racists, and I was just indicating to you as we started here that racism and apartheid has not ended in this country. So to the extent that the people we trusted to be in political leadership, who should have been aware about this particular reality, became so naive and accepted this route, it's shocking. But we will deal with this matter nonetheless, because the people will not accept it, the situation to continue in this form. But the bottom line here is that, firstly, capital, South African capital, monopoly capital, which is a strategic enemy of our people and of our revolution. Because, look, we're not nominally, the face of capital were white racists. But the system that oppressed us was a system of the economy, which we have not even disintegrated. It's still as intact as it was in 1994. Albeit it has taken in one or two black faces. Even something that irritates me badly is that when they appoint their CEOs of these business organizations, they appoint African people to speak on behalf of business. And you must listen the bile they spew against our people every single day, trying to justify the interest of capital. These African faces, they are just nothing else to me except paid agents of the capitalist system. Some of them I've engaged one-on-one, because some of them even try to talk to us to try and lobby us into accepting their nonsense. For instance, you'll see an African woman or African man speaking on behalf of business, condemning the introduction of universal health care for the people of this country. So that's how far this thing can go. And of course, they try and bring some intellectual debate into it. Nothing concrete except elitism. In fact, even those so-called intellectual debates are largely about elite debates, securing the place of the elites on the table. Now, what we see today is the bringing back of racism through the back door, through the collaboration of this deal. The deal that is called Government of National Unity is not Government of National Unity. This is just the NCDA deal. It's as simple as that. And the DA, and that's why in one of my public address, when I was addressing our 103 anniversary of the Communist Party, I thanked Ms. Helen Zille for telling the truth. Because she has been, we learned more from what she was saying than what our own comrades were telling us.
You've spoken about how the SACP wasn't actually consulted on this deal as well. Is that true? And are these debates within the alliance happening? Because, of course, on the surface, it seems like everyone is happy with this coalition arrangement. But to what extent do you think there is actual dissent within the alliance?
Firstly, there was no consultation on this thing. And it's very important you raise this question, because an impression has been created that we agreed to this deal. No, we did not agree to this thing. We had proposals. In fact, if any engagement that took place would have been about our first positions, the day after elections, we met as the Alliance Secretariat which was for the first time physical, because the ANC has been reluctant to see us physically, so that we can confront one another. We met. We propose from different perspectives. The Communist Party proposes a minority government option, because the ANC has created a framework of 4 options. Re-election as one of them, minority government, a grand coalition, government of national unity. And we said, opt for minority government is the best option. Actually, the reason we said that, we gave a political reason for it, is that it will free the ANC from any obligations it might have or still has to capital, which capital has entered the political space openly for the first time in these recent elections.
Sure, by funding.
By funding, and also coming out much more strongly to say the ANC must leave. Even creating lies about the ANC. Now we said, whatever obligations we have to capital, they've ended. They were ended by capital. We don't know those obligations, but at least capital ended those obligations with the ANC. We said, you are now free. You can no longer have excuses why you can't do right to the people of this country, why there can't be class transfer of power, why there can't be radical change of the state of the economy, why can't we deal with the structure of the economy. There could be no more excuse. The same posture was supported by COSATU, or the minority option was also supported by COSATU. So the ANC came with this. In that meeting, comrades from SANCO arrived late because this meeting was organized quickly. But one of their comrades came, he participated, he's one of the support teams. He was there during this debate. And we put our options openly. Then the ANC had brought there a document, this so-called statement of intent, that they read to us. We said, okay, so you have already been involved in crafting this thing. Give us the copy so we can go through it and make comments. They agreed.
Right.
The whole week goes, they don't give us this copy. We are looking for it.
A week?
Yes. Ultimately, they give us the copy the following week. That following week.
So this thing had been around for quite a while then.
Yeah. They had it. So they had it for some time because it was already, the SG was reading it from his iPad.
Wow.
Yeah, it was reading word by word, reading in that meeting. We said, no. We want to see what you are reading. We don't want to buy something that we can't feel its true content. We want to analyze it and make comments. Of course, they agreed to this particular process. We made comments. When they finally made the deal with the DA, our comments are not integrated. Not once. Not even a single word is integrated of our comments. They go ahead and sign this thing. So our consultation was petty. We will formally say we had a meeting with the alliance and therefore the alliance has been consulted. No, we have not been consulted. That's one. Secondly, we get to meet because the Chief Justice then announces the date for the sitting of Parliament.
Yeah, sure. That fateful day.
Yes. Then we get to meet, the ANC convenes a meeting of the Alliance Political Council. And they have no right to do that, by the way. It's not their job. The Alliance Political Council is not convened by one organ in the Alliance. It's convened by all of us. So we arrived there to say, okay, what is the situation? They want to present the framework about what to do with these elections. Because, and also basically they were briefing us about the negotiations with other parties. And we said to them, okay, we don't know what you are negotiating. Firstly, we haven't finalized the statement of intent. And on the one hand, you are negotiating. We need someone from our side in your negotiating team. The same, that's now the meeting of the alliance, this meeting that is brought of all alliance partners. But we rejected that meeting to be an alliance political council meeting because the Alliance Political Council is convened by the Secretariat of the Alliance. They prepare for it, they plan the agenda. When the ANC calls us to this so that we can just come and give them the mandate to go and sell out our people, we couldn't accept that. So that's the reason why we said we want to participate first in drafting the statement of intent to reflect also our ideas and the ideas of our revolutionary movement, not just of the political elite that wants to make some deals.
Yeah.
Secondly, we want someone to sit in the negotiating team. They agreed. They never invited any of our people to the negotiations. They never put our recommendations on the statement of intent, both from us and from COSATU. So there's been no consultation.
Sure.
What it's important to also clarify, because, and I clarified this in this show, because they've also spoken lies about this thing. When we met with the ANC, very first day, Monday after the announcement of the elections result,
right,
we said to the ANC that immediate task of the revolution today is to secure the liberation forces to keep the political power. In other words, to secure the presidency under the leadership of the ANC. Because in any case, we still had more votes than any other party. We had the legitimacy, so to speak, to set up government. But the Moonshot Pact, funded by imperialist forces, European Solidarity Council, as well as the Brent Hess Foundation that coordinated this Moonshot Pact, they had a plan B in which if they fail to remove the ANC from power, they will collaborate with it. The ANC accept this thing, just with no resistance. And what worried us was, how is it possible that a liberation movement behave in this form? Now, that's why we have come to a conclusion, or in this case, which I expressed much sharply, because one feels that the weaknesses of political leadership in our movement have made us more vulnerable as a movement. Because when they go to the negotiation, they negotiate with the weaknesses in consideration. And hence, it is imperative for all liberation movement to have systems that makes leaders account, including myself in my own organization. If I'm doing fundamentally wrong things, I shouldn't subject the Communist Party to wrong things. So it is in this regard that this thing, we said, go and secure this moment, political leadership of this transition, which is a difficult transition wherein we lost political power. We lost this power in the fight against capital. But the difficulty this time is that the ANC distanced the people in the fight against capital.
Do you think there should be some kind of leadership accountability, and do you think there should be consequences for the decision that has been taken?
By the ANC? Well, the ANC must decide, but to the extent that in the alliance we are treated this way, yes, there should be consequences. But what consequences, Sizwe? Because the framework of the alliance accords the ANC a rare privilege to lead all of us. But this rare privilege has been abused on a daily basis. It's been undermined. And to the extent that many things that are happening could have happened before, that is practical interventions to respond to the needs of our society and so forth. It's not because there's been lack of ideas. And some of them try to create an impression that there's been lack of ideas. They're talking absolute nonsense. There's never been lack of ideas about alternatives to the situation facing our country. The issue is that the political leadership accepted to be the spokespersons of neoliberalism. They are addicts of neoliberalism. That is why in fact, neoliberalism is an economic policy of capitalism. So it's a modern capitalism that seeks to take away public economy into private hands, into private economy. then it seeks to transform or to enhance the capacity of corporations against the state. Now, you have a liberation movement that doesn't value the power of the state. That is why they can enter into these deals, because they will benefit from these deals. The people won't benefit. But if capital comes here, they seek the political elite to sew together some deals in that particular specific country. They will choose them or their families, as is the case. So this is part of the problem. And that is why the liberation movement must have safeguards and instruments that can hold these leaders accountable. That's why in the Communist Party, we have set up the Central Ethics Commission, as well as we're finalizing the setting up of a discipline inspectorate, which will have almost equal powers as a central committee. It can hold anyone accountable, including the general secretary. They can call me and say, we pick up, there's a problem here. They would have investigative capacity, and they can hold me accountable, or hold any other leader of the party accountable, and put binding recommendation to the central committee to remove this particular fail. But in this case, we have a movement that is so fractious, factionalized. So it's battle of factions. I'm not interested in the battles of factions. I don't want to belong to any faction. I don't belong to none of these factions. That is why some of them are uncomfortable with me. And that's why I rejected nomination to the ANC NEC at conference on 2 occasions. Because I wanted to express my independence at any point in time on behalf of the party that I'm leading. Not to go and be a supporter of factions. Whatever the faction decides, this is the way we even have to justify it in public. Like this justification of this government of national unity. They even create a new theory that the people voted this way. That's a lie. The people never voted for government of national unity.
Absolutely.
The people voted, the government of national unity is a political choice. And they mustn't run away from that political choice. It's actually an ideological choice of the bourgeoisie. This is the choice that they've taken. And this it strains the relations in the alliance. There's no doubt about that.
I think that's very clear, because I've seldom seen members of the alliance really articulate themselves in this way publicly about how disappointed they are with the decision.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to my mind is, of course, where to, not just necessarily for the alliance, but for, let's call it the left, or in some ways the more radical elements of the liberation movement as a whole. Now, you gave Floyd Shivambu his first job, I believe, or something like that.
Yeah, at the Communist Party headquarters, yeah.
Yeah. On the other side, in the opposition now to the ANC, you've got the EFF, and we've just had this big break within the EFF, and then you've got the MK. You were very critical of the Zuma era, I think rightly so and bravely so, at a time when very few, just like now, very few within the alliance were able to speak publicly about the Zuma era. Do you think that there is a possibility for a reconfiguration that may be outside of the ANC, where these other formations maybe find each other? Because if they were to find each other, it could actually be bigger than the ANC. But on the other hand, there are obviously sharp differences between, for example, the SACP, the EFF, and MK. But on the other hand, there are some similarities in your message which actually diverge from the neoliberal policy trajectory of, say, the DA and some elements of the ANC. So I wonder what your thoughts are of the prospect of a real fundamental shift in our politics, where maybe we see different kinds of alliances forming over time.
Yeah, certainly. We are working on those alliances to start with. Not much with those parties.
Sure.
But we have been working on them. They're not easy. We had conceptualized an idea from our Congress to build a broad left movement. as well as a popular left movement to fight for basic issues of the left. But this, at the moment, in the context in which the political system, the capitalist economy, it's rapidly consolidating as a neoliberal hegemony in the country, requires even us not only to be obsessed much with the popular left front for its own sake and for some basic reforms.
Sure.
Important as some of these reforms are, for instance, we want a left front to defend the national health insurance, for instance, a left front to roll out universal basic income grant. Those are important, but they don't transform power relations between capital and the working class. Capital is still in charge of the economy, that kind of a thing. So we are looking where we believe what may ultimately be the ultimate alliance is a class alliance against capitalism, where capitalism is fully confronted. But this will require a number of things. Some of them, we can't debate them here now,
sure.
because
I appreciate that.
I haven't processed them inside the Communist Party as well.
And
they may create problems.
Sure.
So that's one. We still need that because it is clear the dominant faction in the ANC, the neoliberal faction, which is the president's faction, because that's how it carries itself out and is supported by the president. It may not be named. I'm naming it for all I care. It's a neoliberal faction, centralized in the economic policies driven by the national treasury, defended by the presidency, and dominant in the ANC, NEC, and in ANC provinces. So it effectively says that the ANC is shifting. In fact, I've said once that the ANC that we're in alliance with is not the same as the one we're working with. Because the one we're working with follows one economic trajectory, one ideology of capital, the most arrogant and reckless one, free market neoliberal capitalist economy. That's what they're following. That's not the one that we're in alliance with.
And you see more and more ANC leaders actually publicly saying this is what we agree with. On the sidelines of, I was in Cape Town when the president and the speaker were elected. And the famous deal was struck. And someone from within the ANC took me aside and said, look, I watch your videos and very nice. But what you don't understand is that some of us support capitalism and we're not apologetic about that.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was shocked because usually ANC leaders would kind of at least not profess that in public. But he said, you must understand there's a capitalist faction in the party.
And it's the dominant one now in the ANC. Yes, and this they want to make the ANC not different from the DA. In fact, they've almost done it. It's not different from the DA in the way that they carry it out with its ideas. They bring the ANC to be the articulator of capitalist ideas. Now, that's lack of political ideology, because capitalist ideology never frees the masses. They oppress the masses more and more. It doesn't matter what the leaders say, how the leaders justifies them. But capitalism is not meant for the people. It's meant for a small elite of entrepreneurs. Even entrepreneurs could be from all sides, but this is for bourgeois entrepreneurs. That is the capitalist forces. They're never for the people. So you can't stand as a movement of the people and then follow an instrument that is against the people. So it also tells you the caliber of the quality of leadership that we are having. I'm not surprised by that. But you see, that's the point. The point is that the ANC leaders are quick to say, the ANC is not a capitalist organization. But they don't further affirm that it's neither a socialist organization. They say the ANC is not a socialist organization. But they never say it's neither a capitalist organization too. That's why its primary economic policy is a mixed economic system. It embraces the best elements found in all of these two institutions. But they've been following one monolithic ideology of capitalism. And they don't want criticism. And if you say so, they say no, because they take their ideas from Davos, which is a capitalist think tank association of all CEOs of the world and so forth. And the governments here, they think if they go to Davos, they've arrived. They're too excited. Now, that's one big issue, Sizwe, I have about South African revolutionaries. They get too easily excited. And this is a thing that I'm not impressed with. They get too excited by power, by basic small things, by privileges and so forth. And I think in the rebuilding of our movement and in the rebuilding of the reconfiguration of the alliance as one, which, by the way, they are now rejecting, and we're having a debate about that. I personally believe where it is an inconsequential debate anymore, because the ANC, despite many efforts that we have placed on the table about this concept of reconfiguration of the alliance, basically trying to tell them to change the way they do things. They don't seem to understand. They don't read their own literature. And that's part of the problem that you have. All the time, you have people that you have to remind them about their own decisions, their own conference decisions. But they will stand in platform and say, well, implementing conference decisions. That's why I challenge the ANC officials about the economic resolution that they released after Nasrec. That conference, the presentation of decisions in conference was almost public on the screen, on video. I said to them, they release wrong economic policies. And if they say no, particularly on a section that deals with bringing so-called competition in the network economies, which is now the cornerstone of the GNU framework. The network economy is where it's about water, electricity, telecommunications, sanitation, those kind of things. Road networks and transportation and so forth. It's called network economy, the language of the IMF and the World Bank.
Right.
They want privatization of this section. This is the section of the economy in which any serious government leads society on. You don't hand over those to government. I say, let them bring in. I would have stood up in that conference to oppose this thing. It was not decided in that conference, but it's decided, it's put as part of the resolution. That's completely wrong, because the so-called bourgeois scholars of the ANC, who process their documents, when they go for a process of cleansing their documents after Congress, it's supposed to be about grammar and this and that, consistency with political literature of an organization. They change the entire direction. But it's a direction that was required by this neoliberal faction. And they couldn't say it in conference. They were defeated, actually, those who attempted to do it in conference. Post-conference, they put it. And they want to justify this as an ANC policy. But the inexperienced guys who get excited to be in the NEC and so forth, they think they've arrived. So they defend this thing with their life.
Meanwhile, it wasn't actually a resolution.
Yes, it wasn't actually like that. But now, coming to this one element is about the reconfiguration of the alliance. Which itself, it's under very serious strain. The alliance itself under very serious strain because of this conduct and behavior of more neoliberalism, more capitalism for us, when they know this cannot resolve any social problems our people faces, socio-economic problems, so to speak. Then is the possibility of formations outside the ANC. These formations, we will not go out as a Communist Party to set up formations against the ANC. We will collaborate with organizations to work on framework of socio-economic transformation that is radical, that can change the current capitalist system in our country, that can ultimately deal with the fundamentals. For instance, we launched way back in the 90s as a Communist Party a campaign for the return of the land. We are the first political organization to do this at a sustained level. Mawubuye Umhlaba. That was our campaign, Mawubuye Umhlaba campaign, which led to the 2005 Land Summit. We're central in that as the Communist Party. Because the government didn't even have a bigger transformative agenda on land. The land, which is the principal form of property relations. Property relations determines whether people are poor or rich in a country. So it's so fundamental, this question. So we placed it on the table. We've been getting gradual reforms on the land question. We've been unhappy about this thing because it hasn't happened. So if we get, for instance, and I dare say, and it's very important for you to also know this thing, because we've been consulting with organizations to deepen engagements in other forms. We've even met the PAC, for instance.
Sure.
The Communist Party meeting the PAC. This is how unbelievable it is. But that's the reality. But that was before this brouhaha that has happened. Now the PAC has joined the Government of National Unity. We supported them joining, going there rather than the ANC, because the ANC decided to move along whether we said we agree or not. And we felt liberation parties should be inside there. But they should not be inside there to just go and continue the political elite, agenda of the political elite and subservient of our people by the capitalist forces and by the racist organization represented through the DA. So we want all other formations. We have engaged with the EFF, for instance. We still have to have new engagements in this regard because the lead person at the time that we were talking to, Comrade Floyd, has left.
Yeah, so you were,
but he wasn't alone in the engagement. So it was not just we were not engaging him at personal level. We were engaging him as the leader of the EFF.
Yeah,
there were others, Dr. Ndlozi and so forth. So we can still link up with that engagement to see what is it that we can do together on socioeconomic transformation of our society.
Would you, since you already spoke to someone like Floyd Shivambu in the EFF, do you think there's scope for conversations with the MK?
Well, there should be no scope completely. What we have simply said about the MK party is that, in fact, our posture for this moment was characterized politically and ideologically in this form that we do not want to work with the forces of neoliberalism on the one hand, and forces of state capture, which somehow President Zuma embraced. And this was our difference with him. Remember,
you were very vocal.
Yes, remember we worked with him when he was in the ANC until the point where he started deviating from the core mandate of our engagement with him and the agenda that we set up, the 5 priorities of his government, which were about rural development. What is rural development that he has done since? The rural hinterland of our country remains the same, so to speak. So it's just one example. But to the extent that he behaved and sought to even justify corrupt elements, I mean, we have some of the people that in the past we felt they were doing well who were not doing well. Who completely destroyed our state-owned entities, who made the ANC to suffer even this current consequence. But the biggest issue was much not about that, was much about his counter-revolutionary posture to stand up and attack the ANC when the ANC was too vulnerable against the enemy of capital. Basically, pushing back these neoliberal elements in the ANC, isolating them back to the corner with the neoliberal forces of imperialism and of monopoly capital here. So we felt this was counter-revolutionary attack on the liberation movement. And even for him to use the instruments of our own movement, Umkhonto weSizwe, he makes it a party, using our symbols. These are things that, of course, someone has said, no, Soli, get over it. The man has done it. Look into what is the content. But the man has to apologize for this. MK was not just an instrument of the ANC on its own. But nonetheless, Now MK is seen as an MK party. Its history is devoured by this counter-revolutionary action of Jacob Zuma. Now, with that, it creates more difficulties. We had extensive discussions even with Floyd about this thing.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm not surprised that he ultimately left.
Wow.
I'm disappointed now that he left, but I'm not surprised. It's his choice.
Yeah.
He has the right to make any of his own political choice. We should not discount in the future on programmatic questions to work with all disciplined forces on the ground to transform our country. We are a revolutionary party. We are not for chaos. But when it comes to a push, we should be able to use any possible means for the interest of our people. For instance, we said to our comrades in the PAC, we said to them, look, because of the different dimensions where we come from, we could perhaps start working together on the fight against crime in our communities. We have people who were trained as APLA forces. My younger brother was in APLA, for instance, from my own blood, was with the PAC. So we said, and it's not, I'm not doing it because of that, but because they're a liberation movement. But we said to them, you have former soldiers who dealt with security extensively in the country. We have former soldiers in Umkhonto weSizwe. We could work together to find strategies on how to protect our communities. This is several years back when we started talking about this thing, but we met with them last year about these questions. Of course, in the context of elections, then we pulled back a bit, but we should be able to reconnect with them and other parties, including AZAPO and so forth. Those with some liberation ideas, even socialist ideas, focus on those areas that we agree on and roll back capitalist hegemony in our society. But fundamentally, we have to change the capitalist system that is responsible for poverty and inequality that our people are still living in. This cannot be resolved by any other way. Whatever the illusions the political elites try to place on the table, try to justify it, it can't be possible. The ultimate transfer of power must happen in this country for the people to enjoy their freedom.
Well, Solly Mapaila, thank you so much for joining us for a candid and powerful interview. And I hope we can welcome you back, especially over these next 5 years, because I suspect there'll be much to talk about. But it's been a true honor to have you on our platform.
I always enjoy this debate with you, Sizwe. And I respect you as an intellectual, by the way.
Thank you.
In your own right. I see you've kept the space in the media space, but I see it as an intellectual space, and great regards in this regard.
Let's hope we survive and various forces don't try to pull this platform down, but we'll see.
No. This platform will survive. It will survive. It must go international. If they pull it off here, you can run it from the next country.
You can help me go underground.
Don't worry. That's possible.
Thank you so much for watching. Help us get to 150,000 subscribers. Like, share, subscribe, and keep it locked on SMWX. Yeah.